and welcome back to us here at the Euro-African Forum. We are going to continue our discussion on green energy and the transition that has to take place in Africa and is taking place. How is it going to be done? Who's going to do it? And how are we going to support it? Now, I come from a country, Iceland, that is mainly run on green energy. And it's one of the keys to why Iceland is one of the richest countries in the world now. We were one of the poorest just 100 years ago. We gained control over our own resources, fishing grounds. Well, we had to get the Brits out of our waters after independence, but we succeeded in that. And then all the energy, the green energy, and lots of it. It needs to be harnessed though. So just to heat up houses, nearly every single house on this volcanic island in the North Atlantic is heated up with geothermal water. We pump up geothermal water, use it to heat up fresh water, and it gets to almost every single house. A couple of farms maybe in the middle of nowhere that still need to burn oil or coal, but that's it. And then we come to the electricity. Harnessing the power of the glacial rivers gives us all the electricity we need and much more. So it's actually powering aluminium smelters and a lot of industry that we could not have and gain from if it wasn't for the green energy. So I mean, just imagine you come to a little village of 100 people and there is a public swimming pool with jacuzzis and hot pots, and it's all warmed up with geothermal water. There are so many good things that come with the green energy. Just air quality, that you can breathe in the city. The difference after we stopped burning coal and oil is enormous. And I think this success story tells us something about the enormous potential of green energy in Africa. Now, there were supposed to be two gentlemen with me. There will be only one. Unfortunately, Clifford Okot Ovino cannot join us. And it's just yet another example of how unreliable energy sources often are in Africa. But with me is Olusegun Odunaya, the CEO of Haven Hill Synergy in Nigeria. Welcome to the Euro-African Forum, Ola. Are you there?
Thank you, Tora. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks to everyone for having me here.
Very glad to have you. Now, given that Africa has 54 countries and there are different and diverse resources and all that, and I know that you have been lighting up Nigeria for more than a decade. I'd like to ask you, just for the audience, to get your viewpoint, your standpoint. Where are you coming from? What's your field of focus?
Thank you. So I lead an innovative, young and dynamic team. At Haven Hill, we use solar energy to generate clean, safe, cost-effective and sustainable electricity within rural and urban Nigeria. As you know, in Nigeria, you still have about 80 million people without access to electricity. And these are people who live at the bottom of the pyramid without access to basic, infrastructure, healthcare, schools, and all those things. So in rural communities, we identify commercially viable communities that, where when we put in our mini grids, our microgrids, it can be beneficial to the community. And then in the urban area, we help businesses, SMEs, commercial and industrial customers to diversify their energy mix, and also give them reliable, and a cost-effective solution. So that's what we've been doing over the past 11 years, and we've been pivoting, to take on new markets. And hopefully in the coming, months and years, we can expand to other, West African countries where you still have, more, opportunities, especially providing access to energy to the teeming population.
Thank you. Now, you say that you'd like to expand and do it fast, as quick as possible, because the need is definitely there. Has the public finance, international public finance, been supportive enough for the green energy transitions, do you think?
Well, we are beginning to see, thank you for that question. We are beginning to see traction, but it could be better. I think we started seeing, if I take Nigeria, for example, most of the international finance that has come into the space, they've come into the core power sector, the distribution company, the megawatt scale, transmission and, generation infrastructure. but that has not translated into results. That has not translated into impact over the years. And so of recent, when we started seeing, a lot of footprints within the renewable energy space, solar, wind, hydro, and all those things like that, the financial institutions are still using the lens of, the traditional power, whatever, to look at this sector. But we are beginning to see traction. For us, we've been able to, I remember our first, commercial project in 2016, we wanted to prove the technical viability of that project, but we were able to get, one of our partners to provide seed capital, to do that project. And from there, we've gone on to raise, commercial capital to then scale and, and take up new markets. But I believe, and I'm optimistic that for us to see scale, in the energy transition, moving from fossil fuel-based economy to, renewables, we need to develop projects at scale. And so, and these are billions of dollars of investment on a yearly basis. I think the statistics says that we must invest $10 billion every year for the next 10 years if we're going to get Africans out of, energy poverty. So the impact is there. It's slow, but I think, and over the last 6 months, we've been seeing, DFIs, announcing, millions of dollars in investment committed to Africa. But we need more of that. We need to see traction, and we need to see scale happen for us to be able to see the kind of results, that we are looking for.
Thank you. Now, to continue a little bit on about this, the influx of investment, because the Green Deal of the EU does include some conditions and trade implications. Do you think that means some complications in the Europe and Africa negotiations and joint partnerships? These conditions you know what I'm talking about, the conditions on less consumption, that less CO2 must be pumped into the atmosphere, etc.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. I think the implications for Africa are multifaceted. Most prominently, a decline in European demand for fossil fuel. I was having a conversation with someone. Ironically, in Nigeria today, the biggest refinery, I think, in Africa is being built. And if we're going to transit from a fossil fuel-based economy to renewables, how do you marry, those conversations, And I said to my colleague, I said, well, we will then continue to consume, our own fuel, because there's nobody that will be buying our fuel outside of the country, because most countries in Europe are setting agendas 2030, 2025, to go from, fossil fuel-based cars to either electric cars and all those things like that. So I think investment needs to come into Africa for Africa to rapidly scale, because at the end of the day, when the EU and all other countries, developed countries are beginning to, move to, the green economy, largely, revenues in Africa are dependent. I think in Nigeria, almost 50% of our revenues is dependent on oil. So I think there'll be a decline in European demand for fossil fuel alongside, rising demand for cobalt, nickel, and others. So there are opportunities for African economy, for African nations to take advantage of this if we can, sit down and plan 5-10 years ahead and not wait for things to happen. And we've seen how, certain economies, you take the UAE, for example, how they've been able to move from an economy that is dependent on oil, to an economy that is dependent on tourism. So I think the economy-wide effect of the EDG, however, extends beyond this energy transition. We just need to sit down, create a roadmap, create a strategy, and see how, we can quickly harness, the opportunities are, available in this transition.
Just a little extra question on that, because I see that many worry that the phasing out of the fossil fuel will lead to unemployment and to stranded assets and things like that. But isn't it also, the green sector is going to create a lot of jobs and attract a lot of much needed investment. It doesn't have to be that negative. And now the question is whether
You
all
know,
is...
and I-
Yes, there he
and
is. Sorry. Yeah, you disappeared just for a few seconds, so if you can start your answer again, that would be great.
okay, thank you. I said for economies, for nations that are not prepared, they would experience massive job losses. Because I believe for every job loss that the fossil fuel-based economy creates, there are 2 jobs or 3 jobs that the green economy will create as well. So it's about, like I said, answering the last question, nations preparing, setting a roadmap, setting a plan. Can we begin to create, programs and policies that will help us transit, that will create the jobs, the policy, the infrastructure that we need to, diversify, our income, our revenue, and even our energy infrastructure. So I think you are correct. It will create a lot more opportunities, but for those opportunities to be created, there needs to be investment, massive investment in those critical sector.
And because we are here in the Euro-African Forum, we focus quite a lot on what the Europeans and the Africans can do in their joint partnerships. But as you know, their aspects are very, very different. Do you think that maybe, as you were mentioning, the Green Deal is quite different from the African standpoint and viewpoint? Do you think this might actually mean that Africa is looking further east? It would rather, both governments and energy companies would rather look east, i.e. China, than to Europe for partnerships?
I think African countries have in recent past benefited immensely, from its European partners in financing and cooperation for mainstreaming of sustainable and climate-friendly energy projects. Yeah, the East, with China, for example, they are trying to move massively, into the space. And if you followed what happened recently, especially in the last 4 years, because event most importantly, some of these policies and direction are shaped, by the leaders that are in place. When former U.S. president was in power, you saw how China was making a lot of moves because a bit of reluctance or trying to redefine principles. So I believe that this has by far set the pace for financing and cooperation in this regard. What the East China offers is a fast pace and large scale manufacturing of equipment. Labor is cheap, in China when you compare that to, the EU. And so we tend to, tilt towards, that direction. But I haven't really seen, that kind of capital investment, financial resources, that can actually move, the needle come into this space. And I think EU has, the opportunity is there, for these things to happen. And well, we can say China has outpaced the rest of the world when it comes to ability to manufacture at scale, but to increase the scope of the gains recorded so far, African countries can look into local manufacturing, partnerships with EU manufacturers, setting up local assembly plants, and of course, all these things rises and falls on leadership. The EU being able to support, come in, bring in the resources, the technical expertise, the technical assistance that is needed. Because sometimes it's not always about, I know the European Union and GIZ are doing a lot in terms of technical expertise in the energy sector in Nigeria, for example, and in some West African countries. So I believe with the execution of related projects like this will lead to job creation and reduction in delays, to project timeline.
And perhaps it's a bit early to say you need to phase out fossil fuel, because as we know, in just a couple of decades, Africa needs to double its energy output. How much of that can be renewable energy, given that the government's focus on that and everything goes as well as you can imagine? How much of it can be renewable energy?
I think Africa has the potential to generate 50% of its energy from renewables. That's very, very possible. For example, when you take Nigeria, we sit the climate is friendly. We experience the sun like 6, 7, 8 months in a year than. So I think we can, but of course, it requires investment, massive investment, within the space. And we've been able to leverage on all the renewables that are available from wind, to solar, to hydro, and to all these other renewable. So I think we can do a lot. We are already doing it at a scale that is impacting on the rural communities. And you can just imagine if in another 10 years all the rural communities in Nigeria are electrified, and their needs are being met, from renewable energy sources. That's a whole lot of, and then imagine that happening at scale across several West African countries and several other African countries. So I think we can generate 50% of our energy from renewables. The resources are there, the wind is there, the sun is there, and I think it's the willpower and the ability to attract the right investment and right capital into the space to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Ulda. I wanted to end on this positive note because, the enormous possibilities are there. Is there anything you'd like to add before some final comments?
Yeah, I just would like to say that there are a lot of things that has been done over the last 10, 20 years. We need to accelerate. We need to double down on those initiatives. We need to put our money where our mouth is, as they say. We need to come to the table and take away all the barriers. This is not the time to trade blade games, promises that are made has to be fulfilled. Because when you look at it, Africa has been the least contributor, to climate change, but is feeling the impact of climate change the most, and so I remember recently one of the vice president of Nigeria, because it's easier to build a gas power plant of 100 megawatts than to build a 100 megawatt solar farm. When you look at the land space that is required and all those things, but you will see that the right financing, even DFIs and rest are trying to withdraw financing, for fossil fuel based energy generation. So if we are going to encourage African countries to also diversify their energy mix and go renewables, the EU and all the partners have to come to the table and put in the right kind of financing, the kind of the structuring, the terms that will help, us accelerate this kind of scale that we want to see within the next 10, 20 years.
That is so correct. Thank you so much for being with us, Ola.